Hi, I'm Rick Briggs, Veteran Program Manager for the Brain Injury Association of Michigan. And what we're going to talk about today are what is commonly called the invisible wounds of the wars on Iraq and Afghanistan and the War on Terror, and that is post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury. Our primary focus will be on traumatic brain injury issues, and we have with us today an Afghanistan vet who will be talking about some of the symptoms he's living with and some of the treatments and so on and the outcomes from that. But first I want to educate the public a little bit about traumatic brain injury in general. In 2001, when the towers came down, the federal government was spending about $10 million a year on traumatic brain injury. And that sounds like a lot of money, but let's put it in perspective. That equals about $1.55 per brain injury per year. And with $1.55, you can't even buy a good brochure, let alone have much of a research program. Now, with the emphasis on traumatic brain injury coming out of the war, that's one of the really good benefits to both the public, the private sector, and to the DoD and VA, is all the awareness and rehabilitation and treatment programs that are coming about as a war has increased the emphasis on traumatic brain injury. So TBI, just to put it in perspective, if you were to take traumatic brain injury and compare it to some of the other significant issues our society faces, if you took breast cancer, HIV/AIDS, multiple sclerosis, and spinal cord injury and were to combine them collectively and multiply that total number by 6, that's how many people are affected by traumatic brain injury every year. And we're talking about 1 of every 50 people in the U.S. sustain a traumatic brain injury or live with the issues associated with it. And we're going to get to some of the symptoms and stuff a little bit later. But first I'd like to talk about what we do as the Brain Injury Association of Michigan Veteran Program. Our primary emphasis is on education, awareness, and advocacy. We do all the post-deployment training for the Michigan National Guard, the troops coming out of Iraq and Afghanistan. And it's our goal to make them not only aware of the issues and so on, but to make them understand that these wounds, while they are invisible, they are very much treatable. And one of the major components of that is getting the troops to overcome the stigma associated with sustaining a closed head injury or one of these concussions from an improvised explosive device, which we'll refer to as an IED as we talk, and to raise their hand and say, I'm having symptoms, I look fine, I look normal, but it is really affecting my life. It may be affecting my relationship with my wife or my children. It could affect everything from your sense of smell and taste, balance, memory, cognitive functioning, your executive functioning, word retrieval, speech issues, all the communications and cognitive processing that goes on by the brain has been impacted by these ballistic shock waves. So what we need to do is get the word out to them that you maybe have sustained these injuries, but they're very much treatable if we get them in time. And the analogy I use, and it's not a good analogy, but it's like pouring concrete. Right after an injury, you only have a certain amount of time to work it when it's still pliable and you can still get the treatment to have an impact. If you wait 4, 5, 6 years before you start seeking out treatment, these issues are going to be set. And there are some coping and compensation skills that can be taught by certified brain injury experts, but for the most part, you want to get in as soon as you realize and recognize that life's a little harder right now than it used to be or it should be. And with us today we have an Afghanistan vet, Dan March. He and I have become friends over the past year or so, and his father was actually a Vietnam vet. Right now is Dan March, Afghanistan vet, and Dan, really glad to see you again. We spend a lot of time together, and what I'd like you to do, if you don't mind, I know it's difficult to talk about the war and so on, but just share with the audience first, if you would, about your injury, how you were injured, the folks that were with you, and that type of thing, and then we'll get into some of the symptoms.
Well, I was deployed in '05 to Afghanistan, and in the spring of '06, I was involved in a IED explosion. I was hit with that blast, and endured some injuries to my spine and my back. I spent I went to the CASH, which is the field hospital, several times for headaches, migraines due to concussion. In the area that I was at, we rarely wore our protective gear, so pretty much just my desert uniform. I was not in my vehicle when I was involved with the accident.
The way I understand it, you were doing kind of an unusual military mission. We won't talk about that, but there were two other guys with you, and when they were hit by the blast also.
That's correct. There was two other individuals that were with with me. I wasn't exactly with them in the immediate area, but close enough to suffer from the blast. They perished in that blast.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And so you immediately started having some symptoms. I understand you've told me off camera that when Dan was blown back, your head was actually snapped forward so bad that you bruised your chest from your chin hitting your chest, and you had a big bruise on that. And
that's correct. When I was hit by the blast, I was lifted up and pushed back. When I landed on the back of my head and my shoulders, which forced my chin into my breast, my chest, and I had a significant bruise from my chin from that accident.
And right now you have sunglasses on because of the bright studio lights. And share with the audience some of the symptoms, word retrieval and all those types of things. Just run down the list to let the audience know out of the 25 primary symptoms. I think we identified 23 out of 25, something like that, that you have gone through. So talk about, now let's talk about your eyes first. You got a very unique pair of glasses on. Dan attended the Brain Injury Association of Michigan's annual conference, which is the largest brain injury conference in the world, right here in Lansing. The Brain Injury Association of Michigan is we're celebrating our 30th anniversary right now. And while you were there, I introduced you to a doctor, Feinberg, and who's on the front edge of some very interesting stuff. Talk to the audience about the symptoms you were having before and what's happened just since you've gotten your glasses.
Okay, the last several years I've been forced to walk pretty much every day with a cane. My equilibrium was greatly affected. Handrails, walking, utilizing handrails wherever I could, walking next to furniture, walking next to the wall down when I was walking down a hallway. When you acquire a brain injury, there's a lot of symptoms, but loss of equilibrium, you have the ability to think and know what you want to say, but have a hard time expressing what you're thinking in words. The glasses that I have on are called prism glasses, and they affect, they actually manipulate the information that your eyes are sending to your brain, and it has allowed me to, I've had these glasses for a month now, and I have, it has cut my headaches almost in half that I have, or that I suffer from, usually on a daily basis. My equilibrium has improved. and I haven't had to use my cane for about 3 weeks. So I've been very impressed with the outcome.
The way I understand it, when I talked to Dr. Feinberg, she says the eyes are working fine optically as far as receiving the information, but the brain was hurt to the point that the two different pictures coming into the brain were shifted a little bit, and that's what was causing the dizziness and the equilibrium problems. And what she has done is actually lied to your brain on what's going in, and the brain converts it back, and so what you're seeing now is actually what a normal sighted person would see, and it's I've noticed quite a bit of change. It's really nice to see you not having to have a cane, and and you're walking faster, your gait's more normal. Your headaches, that's wonderful news.
Yes, it is.
And that, the eyesight is one thing, but when a person thinks about everything the brain processes, I've had vets who've been hit by mortars and IEDs and so on that they come back from Iraq and they say, first night home my wife made me my favorite meal and it tastes different. My wife's perfume my favorite perfume that she always wore smells different. And when you think about everything the brain does, and what we're talking about here mostly, probably 8 out of 10 TBIs coming out of the combat, traumatic brain injuries coming out of the combat environment, are very subtle. They're mild. They look like you. You look normal, as normal as you could, and but really, it's an invisible wound. You look normal. You sound relatively normal. There is a noticeable, like you were talking about, your speech and stuff. There's some hesitation as what we call word retrieval problems and all of that. But you have really improved over where you were a year ago with your speech. And so as you go in and you see a certified brain injury specialist, and we've got an exciting program we're going to share in a moment. We're hoping to get you in the immediate future, getting some very specialized neurocognitive rehabilitation for some other symptoms. But with some of the other symptoms, the post-traumatic stress disorder, losing 2 fellow combatants and just the whole being in a combat environment thing and other things. Have you been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder?
Yes, I suffer from PTSD.
Right. And from what I know and what you've told me from when we first met a little over a year ago and that, you went through the Battle Creek PTSD program.
Yes.
And did that help?
I feel that yes, it did. It has helped tremendously from what I've been able to see myself. The best way to answer that is to get a non-biased opinion for an answer for that question, and that is to have an individual like myself go through a program like that and subject them back to everyday life, and a month, 2 months later, have a long talk with their friends and family that they stay close to, and they're going to be able to explain greater differences than the individual that's went through the program.
And what Dan's talking about right now is one of the most important components of a traumatic brain injury. It's what we call the baseline reference. How, what was the baseline? What was the individual like before he went into combat, and how is he now? And there's a couple of things going on, a couple of sources of information, if you will, to compare. The most important and most significant, excuse me, is the family. It's the spouse, it's mom and dad, it's the kids. Dad has changed, my husband, my wife has changed, they're different. But one of the other ones, the Brain Injury Association of Michigan, is working on tackling. In 2007, Congress passed a law that said that the Department of Defense is supposed to implement the Automated Neurocognitive Assessment Matrix, which is called the ANAM, A-N-A-M. And this is a cognitive assessment that's been used by NASA on the sports, with sports concussion and so on. And it establishes a basic baseline reference. It's not a diagnostic tool to say whether or not an individual has sustained a brain injury or not, but the whole idea was to give these troops going into combat the ANAM, and then when they get out, give it to them again. Now, you were there in 05, 06, so right. This program didn't start till 07, so you didn't take either a pre or a post test, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So the newer vets going over now, the Department of Defense has issued over 600,000 pre-deployment tests, but they're not doing the post-deployment test. They've only done 11,000 out of the 600,000, and that's one of the issues right now. And the argument is, well, the tool isn't totally accurate or anything like that, but the position we take, it's better than nothing. We're over 8 years into this war now, and we know we need an assessment tool, and it's just one of the things to help us ascertain whether an individual has sustained, especially a mild TBI. The severe TBIs, mild, moderate, and severe. The severe TBIs are very obvious. I'm sure you saw them in the hospitals and so on, and they are getting enormous care and rehabilitation. But the guys that are mild, they're less likely to raise their hand. They try to continue doing their job, especially the Guard and Reserve guys that come back, and they may be firemen, they may be police officers, the Border Patrol, they could be anything, and they don't want to raise their hand and saying, I'm having issues or whatever.
But that's only one part of it, though. One part is the fact that you have to make that that individual with that problem has to feel comfortable about asking for help. But I have ran into numerous individuals, just one that we just met here a month and a half ago, that doesn't see that he has problems with his word retrieval and his focus on what he's trying to say and forgetfulness, but his wife,
it's very obvious to her.
Very obvious.
Right.
And his friends, it's very obvious, but to him, he doesn't see that.
Right, and that is one of the things. TBI, traumatic brain injury, is not something to self-diagnose. But for some people, it's more obvious. For you, for example, you're frustrated. You expressed that yesterday in a meeting we had, that you're frustrated in that you want the words just to come out of your mouth, and you want to be able to communicate your thought. You're doing exceptionally well, and I've known you, and we talk almost weekly for the past year, and your improvement is very significant. But as we were talking to this individual you were talking about on the phone in a conference call, he actually made a comment to his wife. We had 8 people on this anonymous phone call. We had a couple certified brain injury specialists on the phone answering questions and perpetuating the conversation. And they were listening to you talk, and this other soldier commented to his wife quietly that, wow, he's really having a hard time speaking and with the word retrieval. And she piped right up and very loudly said, honey, you sound exactly like that. And he had no idea until that point exactly what you were bringing up, is a lot of them don't understand that they are impacted. We have other soldiers that have contacted us that are struggling at work. Their boss is saying, we know you know the material and stuff, but you can't do the job the way you used to do it. Guys that are instructors or had high-level ratings that are just struggling to do something that used to be very easy for them. And so that's very normal for brain injury. On some of the other issues, have you noticed any of the other biological related things? Your adrenaline, do you seem to sweat more? Or are you hotter than normal or colder? Do you get colder easier than you used to? Those are all things regulated by the brain. You know, are you sensing any of that?
To the extreme, I have, it's almost like hot flashes. I have hot flashes. I still, for the most part, I still like the things that I used to do before my accident, but the drive to actually take time out of my life to or take time in my life to do those things, I don't. There's a tremendous amount of things that that I've lost interest in, and there's no other reason for that happening than
you're a different person.
Very.
Yeah. One of the most common things we get from the spouses is, this is not the person I married, which brings in a lot of, you know, relationship related issues. Yes, you know, and now it's marriage is tough enough in a normal environment, you know, and then you add to it this component. And I'd like to talk briefly about the faith-based Veterans Task Force and recreational therapy programs, a lot of these things. And one of the things we're involved with the veteran program is a faith-based Veterans Task Force. And our goal is within 1 year to get 1,000 churches in the state of Michigan educated on the combat-related issues associated with invisible wounds, PTSD and TBI. And what that would entail is when Johnny comes back from the war and he goes to small town Michigan, wherever that is, and Johnny and Susie are having issues. One of the individuals they rely on for input is their local priest, rabbi, pastor, minister, whatever, any religion, as a confidant, somebody they can go to and talk to. And one of the reasons we're on this is when they go in and they're talking to their pastor, he's sitting there looking at a young couple and thinking they have normal marital issues. Mm-hmm. What he doesn't understand is there may be a combat-related component to their issues. And that's our goal, is to educate them on the resources that are out there, the symptoms, and all of the rest of this, so that, you know, as part of the outreach, because for those individuals in the faith-based community, that's an important part of their recovery, and to help a couple, whether it's intimacy or relationships or anger, frustration, you know, the emotional peaks and valleys, and all of those things. I understand you as a married couple, you had a very strong relationship. You expressed something yesterday, if you don't mind, I'll share that. You said it was like your relationship before you went there was like a new girlfriend every day. You know, your relationship with your wife was so strong. It was very just very new and fresh and fun and so on. And now both of you, obviously she's had to roll into kind of a caregiver, and that's kind of taken over a big part of your relationship.
The majority of it.
Majority of it, yeah. So those are all things. So the Faith-Based Veterans Task Force is one of the things we're working on. Another one is our recreational therapy and outreach programs. There's a couple of ways the Brain Injury Association of Michigan Vet Programs is doing that. One of them is through the DNRE. I'm the Vice Chair of the Department of Natural Resources Accessibility Advisory Council, and that's available on the Michigan.gov website if they go to the Department of Natural Resources. And the reason I got involved in this program is accessibility to the outdoors. I know you're a hunter because we were up deer hunting together, and I very much appreciated the opportunity to do that with you. And but access recreation for individuals with mobility issues or any disability is absolutely critical. Of course, I'm working it from the guys and gals that are coming home with mobility issues, but the recreational component is so critical from a therapy standpoint, which kind of leads into my next one, and it's one of the programs I'm very proud of. It's our recreational therapy programs. We conduct a number of events. We actually have our 5th Tips Up for the Troop event coming up, and the Tips Up for the Troops is a bass fishing tournament. It's a pig roast and a carnival type atmosphere, classic car shows, swimming, boat rides, a couple bands, 400 or 500 people getting together with some of our heroes from the state of Michigan. And the Tips Up for the Troops is actually inaugurated into the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame for 2011. We're very proud of that. I have no idea who nominated us, but probably one of our veterans. And it just means the world to receive that kind of recognition. And what we do with the Tips Up for Troops, we do the Tight Lines for Troops up in Manistee, which you participated in. That's a salmon tournament. Yes. We had 147 vets last year. We had Medal of Honor winners, generals, privates, you know, all active guard, reserve, retired, you name it. We had them: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard. We had 5 teams, and the Team Navy won in 2010, so it won the Governor's Cup. So we'll have a little friendly banter there amongst the troops. This next May 21st and 22nd will be the event. It's Saturday, Sunday, and the wonderful folks up in Manistee and Little River Casino is the main title sponsor for that event. So that's an exceptional opportunity. We have over now walleyes for warriors going on up in Bay City. We have Hooking Up Heroes over just north of Grand Rapids area. Newaygo State Park area is hosting that. And these events do a number of things. One, they're a great way to say thank you to troops like you for your service and your sacrifice. And it's the sponsors come forward with that in their mind. The most important thing for me is a little more insidious. It's more on the back burner, and it's the therapeutic value of getting somebody out on the water, the opportunity to bond, the opportunity to talk with other vets, and maybe open up a little where you wouldn't do that with civilians in the counterpart. Now, I brought you today because you have a very special story, if you wouldn't mind sharing, not only about your generation of war heroes, but previous generations. We conducted 5 pheasant hunts this year, the Safari Club International, Lansing, and the Southeast Michigan Bowhunter Chapter, and just a boatload of sponsors jumped on board to put on these free pheasant hunts. And we invited you a year ago to come to Muy Grande when you first contacted us up northeast of northeast Michigan there, north of Alpena. And why don't you share with the audience a little bit about your experience and what went on there?
Well, we all gathered at Muy Grande and went out to do some skeet shooting, and then we came back for some lunch and had a couple safety meetings about the hunt. And then we sat down in the main part of the lodge and just gave everybody a chance to share a little bit about themselves and whatever they wanted to talk about, you know. And it was very nice. I got to meet some new people, hear, you know, a little bit about their story and you know how they got there. I spoke up and said a little bit about myself, and my father was in Vietnam, 67, 68. My grandfather was a medic in World War II in Persia. And I volunteered to go do my part. I wanted to be able to say that I did that. I did ask you to see if I could bring my father along, and you obliged that, which was a very special situation there. my dad stood next to me, listening to everybody's story and listened to what I had to say. And towards the end of our conversation, we got ready to break and go out and go have some fun. Pretty much all of us were headed towards the door of the lodge, and my dad had stood there for 45 minutes or whatever it was, and chewed on some thoughts of his own, but hadn't said anything, and finally mustered up enough courage to ask if he could say something, and it was very special.
It was very obvious at that point that something was eating at him, and everybody literally was at the door, and without it saying a word to anybody, they all knew. They sensed it. Everybody came back and sat down and let him talk.
Yeah. Well, he wanted to thank everyone for coming and giving him the opportunity to come as well, and he spoke about my grandfather and about himself a little bit, and my dad and I's relationship, which was really cool. Prior to my service, my dad and I had a loving relationship, but rough, very rough. My dad suffered from a severe case of PTSD, and growing up around that and walking on eggshells every second of my life, it was interesting. But after I came back, I had not only some commonalities with my father, but I also understood. The more I learned about what I was going through, the more I understood my father without him having to say anything. But it was pretty special. My father actually felt at that point in time, standing in the lodge in front of 20 people or so, that he actually felt like he was having a coming home party, and that was long overdue for 40 years.